This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this week in week 3, we are ready to actually start putting some of our learned information into practice doing real tax returns. What I plan on doing in this video is walking you through a simple return from the book, and then with our second return, doing a little bit more complex example, allowing you to complete it, and then I will explain some of the different facets of our more complex example that I have made and that you will find in the module 3. The first thing that we need to do, if you haven't already, is you need to go into the TaxAct software. This is probably the best place, the most easiest and most convenient to download the TaxAct software. The one important key aspect is I do not believe the TaxAct software is compatible with the Mac computers. You need to do this on a PC. If you are in the Muncie area, we have this software downloaded in our computer lab in the downtown Fisher building in the lab 323 on the 3rd floor. So you are definitely welcome to use it. It's there and loaded as of now for the 2018 tax season here, now that we are in 2019. As long as you have a PC, let's go ahead and click on the TaxAct software. I'm going to go through as much as I can, but I'm not going to re-download the software, just to make sure, just so it doesn't mess up my computer. But basically, prepare the steps to show, to download like you normally would on any other type of download. When you get to the setup screen, I've got a few little items here. One of the items will show at one of the top tabs, prepare info. You will want to click on that and then click add new prepare. That will be you. And all you need to do in that prepare info, and this is one of the first things you'll see when you open up the software, is you'll need to add in your first and last name, and that's it. And then at the very bottom, it'll say skip to step 2 or something along those lines. An error screen will pop up saying you need to have a P10. You don't worry about that. You're not a real preparer. You can click OK, finish, and then any of the other pop-ups, I would always click X, and then so they don't pop up again. That will get you in to the software, and your software, I'm going to open up mine at this point, and we will then look at these instructions. If you don't already, you may want to pull up the instructions that I have. Well, I'm not seeing my desktop. Very strange. Okay, I'm going to go through it the long way. You should be able to find it on your desktop, but mine's pure blue for whatever reason. I'm going to find TaxAct. Here it is. TaxAct 2018. Okay, so you would have seen this. It looks like there is an update, so I will want to update this. I'm not going to do it right now during this video, so I will do the later, but it is a good habit to always update, and if it doesn't show up after like a few days, you may want to go into the online and check for updates. The tax law, there may be mistakes, there may be some things that need to be tweaked, so your tax return may not come out right if you don't do those updates. Okay, so as you're going through to set up the software, I've got some of the opening how to set up. Go through this. This is the same thing that I just talked about that I had in the IVY Learn, the opening information piece. We are now at this point. When you first log in, you may have 2 pop-ups appear. I would always either check or uncheck, depending on which option it is. They're 2 different ones, just so they don't come back up every single time you open up the software. We're now ready to start a new client, and the one that we're going to do is the Jose and Dora Hernandez, and it's at the end of chapter 2 in the multiple choice and in the questions area. At the very, very end of those multiple choice and questions area, you will see tax return problems. In the 2008-19 version of the book, it is on page 2-37. So let's begin to do this return. So let's follow my steps here, how you're going to do every single return. Click File, Add Client Return. So let's start doing this. Click File, and then Add Client Return. And then Add New 2018 Client. Now we're going to put in Jose, and then always put in the correct last name, Hernandez, because the IRS will penalize you if you don't have it spelled correctly, or if you have the Social Security incorrect. So Social Security, they give us the 312-34-5670. You're going to find that all the book returns have this as their opening Social Security number. And then it's also important, as we'll see later on in the year, and even right now, with the standard deduction, potential to have an upped standard deduction. Notice the date of birth, that this person is not over 65, so, but it's good to have that notated. It's also, you need to have if they're blind for that extra standard deduction. This individual is married filing joint. And then now let's put in Dora's name. And her Social Security, which will be one off from Jose's. And then her date of birth, 07/12/1973. The address that they give us, 32010 Lake Street in Atlanta, Georgia. Simply, if you just put in the zip code, as long as the book has the right zip code, it should fill in the city and state for you. Notice they must have been off, or this is a suburb potentially. That's fine, leave it as it is, as long as you have the right zip code in there. And then the rest of it, you don't have to worry about. You should see your name here in the return information, the prepare that you had put in. And then simply, we're going to hit Create Client. Okay. Now, the first thing that you see will be, this is what we are going to call the form tree. And you will, you can find everything you need over here. And then this is our basic, this is where we're going to enter in most of our information. So you should see here the two people you put in, their ages. The software computes that for us. Typically, you won't have to worry about much anything else, except if potentially they're a full-time student, that will be important. Or if they can be claimed on somebody else's return, that will also be important later on. Coming down, you'll see their address, their residency. The next thing here is showing that they are married filing joint. We don't want to do married filing separate. Sometimes if you have a single person, you may need to click the head of household. If it's an individual like what we did in week 2, the head of household, where the ex-spouse, the non-custodial spouse, has the dependency, so you can't claim them down here, that's when you would put their information right here and show that for head of household reasons, you still can claim them for head of household, even though you don't claim them for the child tax credit, perhaps. Now, on this one, we can claim, so we will. And then usually whenever you click on the dependent, or if you wait too long, you will get this auto save, and it's a good thing to go ahead and do that. Save it to wherever you will find the most benefit, wherever you're going to be able to find it the fastest. if you try to click here into the first name, you're going to get an error message, because in this program you always want to link to the a form. There's always a new form to go to. Never ever do the override value unless I tell you, and there's only about one time in this whole class where I'll have you hit the override. So we want to go to open supporting form. It's going to take us to the dependent form. And here, if you've read all the way down through to almost to the maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, it says dependent, and it's a daughter, Adelia. So A-D-E-L-A. If it doesn't give you a last name, we assume it's the same as the parents. Hernandez. It does tell us her Social Security, which is another one off from the father and the mother. Date of birth 03/15, 2013. Relationship, there's a whole bunch of these that we may use later on, but son and daughter are by far the most common. This is a normal situation, so I would say 80% of the time at least you're going to have this one. Child who lived with you or is away at college. Nothing to change here, but you always want to put in the number of months. This one, it doesn't tell us otherwise, so we assume she lived with her mom and dad the entire year. If you don't put in the number of months, you won't get access to the credit. For, again, about 80 to 90% of the return, that's all we'll have to fill in for each and every dependent. If we had more, we would simply click on this little white button here, and it would bring up a blank form, but we don't, so there's no need. Every once in a while, we will need to put in this one. We will need to show that they are divorced and meets the criteria for us to be able to claim them, even though we may not be the custodial parent. The other item that may come into play later on, especially when we get to week 6, is putting in how much dependent care we had for the year in expenses. We also may need to check this if our individual was 19 perhaps, or 20 or 21, and they were a full-time student. We need to show the program that yes, we can claim them. Okay, we've done everything we can on our opening information. It doesn't tell us anything about the health care that I remember just from reading this. Oh wait, it does on the very, very last sentence. They had qualifying coverage at all times, so we're going to put yes here. The only time you won't is when I tell you differently and I tell you that they don't have qualifying coverage for the whole year. We would put no in that case, and then we'll have to fill out a few different forms, but that's not for this example. We're now ready to go into the 1040. I usually like to do this next. So what you're going to do is come over here to the forms and schedules, click on that little plus button, and then the very top one should be the 1040. So now it shows what our filing status is. Our 2 primary adults. Go back and recheck the name spellings, make sure they are exactly correct. I will take off for that. And the Social Security numbers. We come on down, it does show that they had full year health coverage. And then our dependent daughter, and she is eligible for the child tax credit. Make sure that's checked. If that's not checked, then you didn't do something right on that dependent page. You'll need to go back. Now we're ready to start filling in the form. You can see the only number they have filled in is the standard deduction so far for married filing joint. But the first thing that they give us are the W-2 amounts. W-2 amounts go here on line 1. Notice you don't want to just start typing in any amounts. It's going to take you to an error page. And to open supporting form, instead of doing that, you can just click on the little folder and then click on which item is best for that, because this item has more than one option that could go in it. We just want the very normal W-2. They don't tell us here, it's not a full, by any means, full W-2. They don't give us all this information. When I when I give you my own instructor returns to prepare, I will have more of this for you to put in, but you can just simply put in the basics. So we had 45,800 in wages. Then go ahead and put in the rest of the 6 boxes. If you wanted to test it, you could always take this number and multiply it by 6.2% and see if the book's right. Did they take out the right amount of Social Security? And then for Medicare, do the same thing. Multiply it by 1.45% to see if you get 664 and 10 cents. That's all they give us is boxes 1 through 6. Any other normal tax return that you would do will have stuff down here in line 15, 16, 17 for the state, except if you're in one of those rare states that don't have income tax, then you obviously would not. So we've got our basic information in here. Notice it defaults and says, yes, this is Jose's. We also need to put one in for Dora. So we need to click this little white item again, just like we would for a dependent. And this time click Dora. So it gives us a blank W-2. So let's go ahead and fill in Dora's 31,000 in income, along with her federal income tax. That's going to show up on the 1040. Okay, again, they only give us boxes 1 through 6 for this as well. When you're done, there's a couple different things you can do. You can always go to the bottom of wherever you're at and click back. That's going to take us back to the most recent form, so you may have to do that several times if you've been doing a lot of different forms. Or what I usually like to do is I go back up to the very beginning and go back up and go to the forms and go back to the 1040. This kind of gives me a fresh starting point. And I want to make sure that my numbers are correct. So I want to add up both boxes 1 for both W-2s, and do they equal out to be 76,800? And then the other number I want to check is my federal withholdings down here in line 16. Add up box 2 for both people. And should it come out to, let's see, 6328. So that's the 2 things we want to check. It's done all this other computations on its own. It's taken our income minus the standard deduction and said, okay, this is how much taxable income you have. What they did is essentially look this number up, and you could take the time right now if you wanted to and pause. Look this number up in the back of the book for married filing joint, and you will find this amount. That's how much they actually owe. And then subtracting out the child tax credit. But we're not quite done yet. We've still got just one more thing to put in, and then we'll look at the rest of the return and explain it. It says we have we have a taxable interest from the 1099 INT. So we want to go here to line 2, another easy one. If you didn't know that it goes here on line 2, you could go down to, scroll all the way down to documents received and look for the one that says 1099 INT. It's another way to do it, takes you right to it. And this one, it does give us a name. It says it's Citibank. And it tells us then in box 1, $300. After I've always done something, I always like to go back to my starting point, to the 1040. The only thing that's changed is now I have 300 here in my taxable interest. So it slightly has increased my gross income. Therefore, it's increased my taxable income, and my tax then went up slightly. So I owe $59.94, but I get to take off $2,000 for my child. So now I only owe $39.94. I owe $39.94, but I paid in from the 2 box 2s, $63.28. So the difference between what I owe and what I paid in, that's what I'm going to get back as my refund. Do not worry about what Georgia owes, because this book doesn't go into state details. So the key thing you always want to figure here is the federal refund. Okay, that is all on setting up a tax return. Where I'm going to go next with this is to look at a more complex return and how it's just maybe a little different. Video. So we will do that here in just a few minutes.
This conference will now be recorded.
As we continue on, let's look at the main example that I have in Module 3. It's called the in-class practice return for Bell. So if we click on that, it's going to be very similar to the homework that you see down there for the Cook tax return. What you're going to want to do is open up these 3 items. This one gives just the basic information of all of the people in the family and Social Security numbers, all that stuff. These are the actual tax documents, which are more realistic than what you see in the book. So I'll open that up to show us. So we open up this PDF file for the Bell family, and you'll see the first thing I have is an actual W-2s where you have all of the information filled in that you need and the state information down here. I only have, since this is, we haven't talked about a lot of stuff yet, so all I have is just the 2 W-2s for the 2 parents, Wesley and Stacy Bell. So we're going to put in that information, as well as I have one other one here. And this is, as you'll see, Preston is one of the children, a grown children who's in college or at college age. You can see I had to adjust some of the numbers, and without having to make a new return, I may have these updated by the time we get to class so they look a little bit better. But in any regard, this is, you can get the idea of what the number is: 13,500, 652 there for box 2. I have for the 2 of the kids their W-2s to help us out, because we're going to have to decide how many returns do we need to make, who can the parents claim as dependents, and then what about any babies, because Preston has a child that we're going to look at. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the main information sheet for the Bell return. We're going to first kind of go through some of the high points, and then we'll begin to prepare the return. Okay, so I give you the basics for Wesley and Stacy Bell. Notice they were just married 3 months ago in November, so you're going to have to think back, how are they going to file? I give us, as we just saw, I give you the W-2s. And then here are the potential dependents, or at least the people that they associate with that live with them. And you have to decide if they can actually claim them. So Preston Bell is the first child. He's 21. He is a part-time student at Ivy Tech, so we've got to think about how that affects the return and the dependency. He lives with the parents all year. I show us how much he earns. This is actually incorrect. This needs to be updated to the 13.5 as I just showed us. I'm glad I showed us that. So again, we go back here, and it originally was 8,500, but due with the new tax rules, I had to update it. And once you get through all of it, I think you'll see why. So let's go back to that sheet. 13,500 as part-time job. Parents pay for over 50% of his support. So I give you the stuff you need to determine if he can or cannot be claimed by the parents. And then I even throw in a new wrinkle, kind of like that 3 generations that we talked about in week 2. Preston has a new son who lives with him and his parents. Of course, the child doesn't provide over 50% of the support. The child's name is Tyler Bell, and he was born within the last couple years. So he's pretty little. So what we have to decide is who's going to claim Preston, and then therefore, if Preston claims himself or not, who can claim the child, Tyler? And if either can, who should? That's going to be one of the questions down here, as you see below, what I'm going to be asking. So what you're going to want to do is prepare a tax return for each individual that needs to have one. And I'll give you a hint, there should be 3. Prepare an individual and then determine if Wes and Stacy do claim Tyler, the infant, what is their refund? Or what if they don't claim Tyler, what's the refund? And then do a comparison, what's the difference? And do the same thing with Preston. Because I'll give you a hint, yeah, Preston's going to need to file his own return. He's over the threshold. So what's the difference amount here? Which one is better to claim the child if both can? And then coming down here, these are some of the homework type problems, and we'll go through these once your return is complete on how the best way to answer these. Okay, so let's go back to my instructions. So we've talked about Preston and his son, Derek Bell, a normal school-age kid. He's Wesley's kid. And Derek stays with Wesley every other weekend and 1 month over the summer, so thus he's not the full custodial parent. Him and his mother and father, so Wesley, pay for over 50% of the support. And this is Wesley's year to claim Derek. Okay, that's going to be important. How can we claim this kid but kind of not claim him? Because we can't claim him for earned income credit purposes. He doesn't live with us the whole year or over half the year. Remember, that was one of the rules back in week 2. But we can claim his dependency, which is important. We can claim his child tax credit of $2,000. So we're going to have to do a little bit of a couple check boxes we're going to need to click in when we do the tax return. Okay, Wesley's parents live in Florida. They only make $10,000 in Social Security. Thus, none of it, as we'll find out in a couple weeks, none of it actually is taxable. Wesley provides over half their support, which includes their rental apartment. I give you their basic information. Can we claim them or not? How is that done in the tax return? So a lot of this return is based solely on can you claim, who can you claim, and did you put it into the return correctly? So the return knows what to do. Ginger Zinger is Stacy's disabled sister. They live with the Bells. She's always lived with Stacy and now lives with them as a married couple. Let's see, Ginger works and makes $6,500, which doesn't account for over half her support. And I've also provided Ginger's W-2. All right, Wesley, Stacy, and Derek had health insurance all year through Wesley's job. Wesley's parents had Medicare, so that's fine. Tyler had Medicaid, so that's fine. The only thing that's not necessarily good, and I spelled that not well. There we go. Preston did not have health insurance, so we're going to need to see how that's affected on his return. So the first thing that let's go ahead and do is start a return for the Bells, for Wesley and Stacy Bell. I already have the return done, so I'm going to open up my completed return and have you pause the video as you type in different things, because I want to show you the new things that are different from what we've learned in the basics in the past, in that last return with Hernandez. So go ahead and open up, if you don't already, your tax return, put in add a new client. I'm going to do what here is open an existing client because I already have this one completed. So when you open an existing client, you're going to need to find where you saved it. I saved it here in week 3 of our class. Wesley and Stacy Bell. Okay, so you would have put in their, if you haven't yet, go ahead and pause the video and enter in their basic information. Okay, now that you have their basic information entered, there's nothing really we need to put in, as nothing weird with any of the taxpayers. They're just they're normal age. They don't have anything odd going on. We go down through, of course, they're married filing joint. We don't want to put married filing separate unless it was absolutely necessary. Notice here on who I claimed as a dependent. Let's go through each one. We're going to go through each one separately. First, the first thing to notice is I did not claim Preston. And the reason is Preston made too much money and he was not a qualifying child. So if you need to go back to week 2, the rules. 1, he is 19 or older, and he's not a full-time student. So therefore, as long as he makes over 4,150, he cannot be a dependent, and he does make too much. So we cannot. That's going to come into play then with Tyler, because now Preston or Wesley and Stacy can claim Tyler, and we've got to decide which one's better. So the first one we come to then is the next child, the 12-year-old Derek. And we're going to need to put it in a way that the computer knows that we're only claiming Derek for the child tax credit because he doesn't live with us over half the year. So we still put in his basic information, but it's when we get down to the dependent type. We're going to specify that this child lived with somebody else because of a divorce. Yeah. And we only want to put in just maybe 1, maybe 2, 3 months, anything less than 7, basically. And then the last important thing is we've got to check this box that we meet the requirements to claim this kid. Otherwise, it's not going to allow us to claim the child. But it's also going to know then that we don't get to claim earned income credit if applicable, if we would make enough money or not make enough. It's not going to allow us to claim it because of these couple of weird rules that have popped up. So that's the first thing we need to do. Now we need to list both of the parents. Both parents are going to be set up pretty much the same. We're going to indicate that they are a relationship to us parent. And then when we get to here, there's only 5 options, and they would be the third one down, just plain old other dependent. You might think, why would you list somebody as a dependent and then put that they're not a dependent? This one would be for the Derek, the one we just put in, the child who's 12. His mother would list as this is the option. She would still list her son on here as a son and lived with her for 10 months, but she would put not a dependent this year, or actually she would put this, a non-dependent, but it's a qualifying person for EIC and or dependent care credit and or head of household. They didn't put that, but that's basically what that also means. But in any event, this is our parent, so we put other dependent. They didn't live with us, but that's okay because of this key factor. It's still going to allow us to claim them as a dependent. Same thing with the mother, Sally. Everything's the same as Jerry. Parent, other dependent, 0. And then the final one, Ginger, we can claim her because she is disabled. So we're going to want to check this box here that says, yep, she's permanently and totally disabled. Another dependent, and we listed her as a sister, so the tax return will know that, yep, this can be a qualifying child still. But she's not under the age limit, so we won't get any extra benefit. So let's go back to let's now look at the 1040 and see all of the individuals that we have claimed. So I've got the 2 parents, Wesley and Stacy, married filing joint. And I did put, because everybody that they have on the return had health care, so that was the last thing that I had to check back on the basic information. So let's go back and do that. I forgot to show that just quickly. So we were back on this sheet. We entered in all the dependents, and then the next line down is, does everyone in your tax household have insurance? And that's yes. We're not claiming Preston, so we don't have to worry about him on our tax return. And you can see the individuals that qualify for the child tax credit and then the ones who qualify for just the $500 credit. Remember, that's the big difference. These guys over here, you get 500 off per person, so that's good. But anybody over here, you get up to 2,000, which is better. Now we are ready to enter in the W-2s. So we can come here to our W-2, click on the little folder. Yours should say 0. And it's time to enter in Wesley's. Notice boxes 1 and 3 are different. And the amount that they're different will always be down here, or should be down here in box 2 or box 12. And there should be a reasoning not a reasoning, but there should be, this code will tell us why it's different. And if you look at code D, it's because we put money into a 401k. That's a retirement fund, so we may get a little bit of retirement credit if we meet the income threshold, but you'll see that we don't. The other item you see here, DD, code DD, is all that does is tell me as the preparer that they had health insurance. It doesn't tell me that they had it all year. I'd have to ask them, but this does tell me that they had a significant, at least, amount of health insurance time-wise because of the amount. This is how much the employer paid in to their health insurance premiums. So quite a bit of money. Therefore, they probably had it for quite a bit of time, if not the whole year. The rest of the return is very similar to how we did on the Hernandez. The only difference being that we do have state items to put in, and this will become important when we start looking at itemized deductions. It's not as important right now, but it's good to start doing it. Then you'll want to click on that little white item here and pull up Stacy's W-2 and enter in her information. Make sure you check the appropriate box to show that this is Stacy's. Notice she also has a difference between line 1 and 3. The retirement account, again, it's the same code. And that is pretty much all that I've give us that we need to put in. Again, the main part was deciding who can be claimed as a dependent. When we get to Preston, we'll look at the healthcare difference. But now let's go ahead and go into the 1040 and discuss through anything else that may be on here. So I would go back. The first thing I would do before you ever submit a return to be checked, check the spelling of all the names and the social securities, and then check the spelling of all dependents and their social securities. Make sure that there's a checkbox by at least one of these. If not, then you've not put something in correctly. Make sure that your W-2 box 1s add up to this amount, and make sure your box 2 of your W-2 add up to this amount, line 16, your federal income tax withheld. That's the 2 things you can check right away to avoid some obvious errors. Nothing in this problem talked about any other type of income that we had. We just had very simple, straightforward W-2 income. So that is my total income, $95,600. Next week, we'll start to have problems that have other items on them, especially items in Schedule 1. So when you take our income minus the standard deduction for somebody as married filing joint, this is how much we're going to be taxed on. And if you look this up in the back of the book for married filing joint, this is the amount of tax that you would find. So this is how much they owe. But that's not all that they don't have to owe that much, because A, they get to take money off of their bill because of the 4 dependents. You could drill down deeper into this if you wanted to see where the $3,500 came from, but it's really pretty simple. They get $2,000 for every qualifying child. So we only had one of them, Derek. And then $500, as I mentioned, for every other type of dependent that meets most of the rules, and most of them will. So 3 other dependents. So the $2,000 and the $1,500 is where we get to that $3,500 mark. That's how much they get to take off of their tax bill, so that's good news. So we take $82,414 minus the $3,500. we only owe $47.14. We didn't have anything for Schedule 4. We still owe $47.14. We had paid in $10,000, so we paid in way more than we needed to. Therefore, the difference is what we're going to get back. You should have $6,049. Now, notice I did not have Tyler, Preston's son. And that's because I had already done the comparisons. So what you will want to do when you are completing this return, you will want to go back into the dependents and you're going to want to add in Tyler. And then you're going to want to note, what's the difference in our refund? What's the difference in the refund when I put in an extra dependent? And I went ahead and did that. So instead of taking time to do that, I'm going to pull up the answers that I found. And if you read down here up through number 2C, when I did the difference, we have $2,000 difference, and that's simply because of that child tax credit. They got an extra $2,000 off of their tax bill, so we get an extra $2,000 back. This is our refund without the child, without the small child, and this is the refund if I would add him in. So there's a $2,000 difference. What I'm ready to do now is I need to prepare Preston's return with and without his child. So that's what you should do next. Enter in Preston's return, and then don't put the kid in. See what his refund would be. Then go back and enter in the child as a dependent and see what his refund would be at that point. Go ahead and do that. Take the time now to do that, and then here in a few seconds, I will finish off this return and show you what your final answers are or should be. Okay, let's go into now the Preston's return. I've already completed it as well. So I'm going to open my return, go into where I've saved it. Now, best case scenario, as you will have seen, is to have Tyler claimed on Preston's return. But the first thing that I wanted to show you on Preston's was the health insurance. And also that he's filing as single. He's not head of household. He does not pay for that house that the parents do. He's claiming his son, which enables him for the child tax credit. But then I put no here. If I put no here, my next thing that I should do is I need to go over here to the health insurance for the taxpayer and the dependent and make sure these are filled out correctly. Now, on this example, which will be different than the ones we're going to do in upcoming weeks, this one, Preston did not have insurance at all. Because that would make a difference. But I told us here, Preston did not have insurance. If he would have, I would have began to check mark the boxes that he had insurance. And you're going to see that that might make a difference or it may not on his refund. And you can see that it does. Anytime that I put an X in here, he had insurance. And so if he had insurance, he's going to have less penalty. So let's say he had insurance for the last 3 months. Notice his refund continually went up. But that wasn't the case. He had no insurance, so I leave everything blank. However, I need to go into the dependent because it's going to assume that nobody had insurance. But I need to correct that. I need to show that, yes, Tyler did have Medicaid insurance. And so I need to click this full year. If I don't, my refund drops significantly. So I'm having to pay the insurance penalty on Tyler as well. But when I click here that he did have insurance, my refund goes back up over $300, almost $400. So 2 things you always need to do right away is update the health insurance piece if somebody didn't. So once we have, let's now go into the forms, the 1040, and I want to show you where some of this information will be found. So once you've put in his W-2, notice this amount right here, the $695, Schedule 4. This is the healthcare penalty. Remember, it's the greater of $695 per adult or 2.5% of your taxable income. Well, his taxable income is very low. It's only $1,500. So that's 2.5% is extremely, it's not going to come up near $695. Going back up just a little bit, you'll find that the 151, that's all he owes in tax. And therefore, he can take as a child tax credit 151 remaining, leaving zero. Then you add on the penalty. Then you take off how much taxes he paid in. But then this is the big parts. He got this as the child tax credit, and then we're going to talk about these two items come week 6. He got this as the additional child tax credit. So he almost got the full $2,000, but not quite, because he just didn't make enough. This is the most you can get per child down here, $1,400. And then notice how much earned income credit he also received, a big chunk, by claiming the child. If he did not claim the child, he would have owed $695 minus what he paid in. So he would have actually owed money. Instead, he now gets all of this back. He gets all of this back as a refund, less the little bit that he would have owed up here. So he gets back $48.18. Let's compare that. Let's go back to my answer sheet. So without the kid, if I didn't have the child, Tyler, notice he would have owed the 194 difference. I don't think that quite came out to 194. I'm gonna just briefly, and then I'm not gonna save it. I'm gonna take out the child so we can see what it would have been. Tyler Bell, I'm gonna delete the form. Yep, I'm gonna delete that as well for the health insurance. Hit close and then look at, oh, it is still 194, okay. So it came out to be 194. Oh, I remember why, because of that child tax credit up here further. We didn't get any deduction from it, but it did give us something here from Schedule 2. Let's take a look at that. Schedule 2, if you ever want to get to a schedule and you see there's nothing to connect to, that's when you drop down here. There is nothing here on Schedule 2. It shows the health care here in Schedule 4. Remember, Schedule 2 is one of those items I said we wouldn't really use. Okay, so we still owe 151. There was nothing left to take off. Okay. I'm not going to save it. I hope it doesn't save it. It may have saved it, and that's unfortunate. I did not want it to save it, but it did. I'll have to go back in and add the child. So let's pull back up my answer sheet. As you can see, the difference from claiming the kid to not claiming the kid, an extra $5,000 difference compared to only a $2,000 difference here. So therefore, it was way beneficial for Preston to claim his own son. They got back an extra $3,000 that the parents would not have. You can read through some of these other items about who can be claimed as dependent and who can't. Final refunds. And then I went through, and this is very similar to how your homework will look. I'll give you some examples. I'll say, what's the standard deduction? And then you'll type in the correct amount. Or how much child tax credit was allowed for the Wesley and Stacy Bell. It was $2,000. And then I just show you here how I actually got it. But that's not important that you actually show me. You just need to answer it. Now, if you are sending it in for review, then yes, you would want to show me. But I already went through then. I've already talked about this. How much credit do we get for the other dependents? And if you drilled down there, you would have seen the 1,500, 500 apiece. Okay, with that, we are going to close off this week 3. I hope you got something out of it because most weeks will be very similar to this.